The Amazing Spider-Man has a reputation for being a film born of cynicism. A film made for Sony Pictures to retain the rights to Spider-Man. A film made just to guarantee they won't lose their cash cow. A film that burst out of the corpse of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man series. And there was a time when I was younger and I analyzed movies a little differently that I fully bought into that rhetoric. But The Amazing Spider-Man is a film born of cynicism in the same way that every big studio film is a film born of cynicism. These do not start with major studio heads going, gosh, I really love Spider-Man, I would love to make a great Spider-Man movie, that would make a great movie, I'd love that. No, it always begins with, this would be lucrative, that's why we should do it. This could bring us a franchise. This could be a very successful film. They're not really fussed about whether or not these become classics or not, because they are not the ones who give movies heart. The people who give these movies heart are people like the writers, the directors, the actors, the people tasked with actually making the film, and once again, The Amazing Spider-Man is no exception. Yes, this film may have only entered production because Sony wanted to retain the rights to their big cash cow, but it's still a film that is made by people who really cared, which is why I quickly want to throw the whole The Amazing Spider-Man was a cynical movie that was just made to retain the rights to Spider-Man. I want to throw that entire rhetoric out the window before I start this retrospective. It's something I kind of led with in previous videos about this, and well, I've moved on from that. Taste change, I change, that's just how it is. So all the while Spider-Man 4 was in production, there was a kind of backup plan going behind the scenes for a rebooted Spider-Man. Spider-Man 4 was facing some production difficulties. Sam Raimi was not happy with the scripts he was receiving. He wanted to delay the film quite a bit, but there was an understanding that the show must go on, and they kind of wanted to get a Spider-Man movie out sooner rather than later. So, like, The Amazing Spider-Man had to be released at the time that it did, because, again, the rights to Spider-Man would revert to Marvel Studios, which is what a lot of the fans would want, but you gotta see it from Sony's perspective. They do hold the rights to the Spider-Man films. Why would they want to just let them revert? There's lots of money to be made through Spider-Man movies. So eventually, Sam Raimi came to Sony and basically said, okay, you guys move forward with your reboot. I'm out, effectively. And thus the announcement was made. We'd be getting a brand new Spider-Man. This sent some pretty major shockwaves through the pop culture world because the Spider-Man film series was a big deal. These were some of the most financially successful movies of their type. Even if Spider-Man 3 didn't have the reputation the other two did, these were still beloved films. But Sony would be moving in a new direction with a newly rebooted Spider-Man that would take inspiration from Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. A more grounded, realistic, darker Spider-Man. And I think in the discussion of like Raimi's Spider-Man 4 and The Amazing Spider-Man, you kind of have to factor in that, yes, Christopher Nolan did change the game when it came to comic book movies twice. Batman Begins aimed itself at a much more mature audience than a typical comic book movie would, and explored much more of the how and why when it came to Batman. It didn't do the whole movie magic or suspension of disbelief thing anywhere near as much as most comic book movies would do at that time. And then, of course, The Dark Knight comes along, which basically puts the character of Batman into an incredibly realistic world that reflects our own. So for Spider-Man to start taking cues from The Dark Knight only really made sense. And in a post-Dark Knight world, it does also have to be asked, would a Spider-Man 4 have at that time felt dated, old hat? Would Raimi's Spider-Man actually have a place in that time period? Light comic book movies didn't really start to come back into vogue until 2014 with Guardians of the Galaxy. So in that period between The Dark Knight and Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't know if a Spider-Man 4 would have actually survived. So maybe this was the best thing they could do. So this reboot was going to revisit the origin story of Spider-Man, and I think the thing you have to ask there is, what could this reboot do that the Sam Raimi trilogy didn't? Well, there were some things we knew from the jump. He wasn't going to graduate high school in the first movie. He was still going to be a high schooler. And he was going to have mechanical web shooters, just like in the comics. It was going to take a bit more influence from the Ultimate Spider-Man rather than the 616, Ditko, and Romita Spider-Man like the Sam Raimi trilogy did. Comparisons between Sam Raimi and director Marc Webb's takes on Spider-Man are unavoidable. Given that The Amazing Spider-Man is telling the origin story for Peter Parker once again, the question is, how do they justify this reboot? With Raimi's version of Peter Parker, his intelligence was acknowledged by other characters such as Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius, but Peter's key focus, his ultimate ambition, was to be with Mary Jane Watson. His wants, his needs are all things that most hormonal teenagers can relate to in some form. And these are at the absolute forefront of these stories. His potential is extraordinary, but his wants and his goals are intrinsically human. So, to avoid simply repeating that and justifying this as a reboot without treading too much ground, Peter, in The Amazing Spider-Man, has different wants and desires this time. This film tells us in its opening scenes everything we need to know about Peter Parker. The film opens with Peter's parents leaving him as a child with his aunt and uncle, disappearing out of his life forever before cutting to the Peter Parker of today, a socially awkward, quiet guy with very few, if any, friends. Now, Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker fell a bit more in line with the early 2000s nerd archetype. He's incredibly shy, he stumbles over his words. In every social scenario, he's trying to prove himself. He dresses very basic, he's pretty goofy looking, and that's just his demeanor. That's just him. That's how he is. That's Peter Parker. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is awkward in a different way. When Liz Allen asks him to take pictures of her boyfriend's car, he's effectively sleepwalking through the interaction. Prior to that, he's in his own little world, his own bubble. Peter in this film is solitary and introverted. He's happy to be by himself and just avoid social interactions. Harry Osborn is not present in this story. This Peter doesn't really have friends. And creepy as it kinda may be, he doesn't ask Gwen Stacy to take her picture. He just does it from a distance. But we're shown when Flash Thompson is bullying one of the kids in the schoolyard that Peter is willing to step out of that comfort zone and stick up for the kid. He's willing to take the fall for it, so we know that he does have some principles. So here's another major difference between Andrew Garfield's Peter and, well, I'd say Tobey's Peter Parker, but this can also apply to tons of other iterations of the character. Peter Parker is typically the one getting bullied prior to becoming Spider-Man. Andrew's Peter is instead a loner who's willing to take the fall for the kid getting bullied. It presents a Peter Parker with more agency prior to becoming Spider-Man. He's less passive, and that is present in every facet of this version of the character. He doesn't get bit by a spider while on a school trip. He gets bit by a spider when he breaks into a secret laboratory at Oscorp. Why? Because he needs to know what his scientist parents were up to. Peter has a scientific mind just like his father, and he wants to apply that scientific mind to uncovering the secrets of Richard Parker. Not necessarily to continue his research, he doesn't know what that is yet, but to try to discover why his parents abandoned him. That is what makes this Peter tick. He just wants to know why his parents are not in his life. This completely changes the form that the Spider-Man origin story takes. In the 616 Spider-Man comics, the Tobey Maguire version, and most depictions of Peter Parker, Peter has a great relationship with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. He accepts them as his mom and dad. In The Amazing Spider-Man, while there's certainly a fondness there, there's significantly more distance in Peter's relationship with his surrogate parents. He's reprimanded by Uncle Ben when he forgets to pick up Aunt May, or because he was too busy working with Dr. Connors to find out more about his father. His focus is on his biological parents, which causes him to lose sight of the two people who were actually there for him. This version of the origin story draws a lot more inspiration from the Ultimate Spider-Man origin story by Brian Michael Bendis. This is a Peter with less humanity. Now that's not a criticism, as this story is all about him developing that sense of humanity. The wants of Tobey Maguire's Peter from the get-go were intrinsically human, where with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, it's all a bit more complex. He doesn't treat others with humanity. It doesn't matter that Uncle Ben wants to raise him. He's not his father. It doesn't matter that Aunt May was left waiting. She'll be fine. He needs to work with Dr. Connors to find out why his parents abandoned him. It doesn't matter that he's not authorized to enter Oscorp. It doesn't matter that he's taken someone else's identity to do so. This Peter's vision is tunneled. He's focused strictly on that one goal. He's willing to use people to get there. Of course, he doesn't intend on any of this. He's not going out of his way to be selfish, and he does have a threshold. We're shown that, yes, Peter Parker is willing to take a fall for others if they are in any form of actual danger, but he's also willing to take advantage of others to get what he needs. Now, rewinding to how I previously talked about the character of Spider-Man, Past Pup, 2019 Pup. Past Pup complained that Peter Parker was an unlikable protagonist. Now, yes, you could say that this Peter Parker exhibits some unappealing behavior, but it all links back to that feeling of abandonment. Parents are a fundamental in life. Parents are people we can always rely on. Parents teach us how to be human. Peter had parents until he was around about 8 years old, and they left him, his father doing so in a particularly cold and emotionless fashion. Peter doesn't recognize Uncle Ben and Aunt May as his parents because his entire idea of what a parent is has been completely thrown sideways by Richard and Mary leaving him. These are the roots of his character. Now, let's talk a bit about Andrew Garfield in the role of Peter Parker. Again, he's less conventionally nerdy. He's actually incredibly good looking. In the past, I've said that he was too good looking for his social struggles to be in any way believable, and that's a point that does get echoed around a lot. But one thing I've learned in life is that if you're a solitary person, if you're troubled in the way that this version of Peter Parker is, if you're just a bit awkward, looking good doesn't change that. Good-looking people don't look in the mirror and say, "Gosh, I'm good-looking, guess I'll go excel today." That's just not how it works. Andrew Garfield absolutely sells the distance between this young man and his understanding of humanity or lack thereof. It's like sleepwalking through life, nothing to prove to anyone. Fundamentally, Peter Parker is a wallflower. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker absolutely lines up with that fundamental, but a lot more is built on it than with, say, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. With the big difference between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's versions of these characters being that Tobey Maguire begins his story as a passive character. His understanding of humanity is perfectly solid. He's accepted Aunt May and Uncle Ben as his parents, and he just wants to live an ordinary life as an ordinary guy. In the Raimi trilogy as well, we're never told anything about Peter Parker's biological parents. It's not relevant to that story, but it's also never stated that they abandoned him or left him. Peter may have no memory of them, or maybe he's at peace with their deaths, I guess. It doesn't really matter, and that allows Peter to be more cool-headed, the passive, mild-mannered dork that he is. It's a testament to how well constructed these two depictions of these characters are. Tobey's Peter is certainly more approachable from the jump. Sure, he's a bullied geek, but he doesn't come with baggage from the get-go. You see him develop that baggage over time, where Andrew Garfield's Peter needs much more time to be established and explored. He's got emotional barriers. When Peter gets his spider powers, the first thing he does with them is use them to humiliate Flash Thompson at a game of basketball, which he gets into trouble for, and Uncle Ben is called in. So, the spider bite. Unlike the Raimi films, it doesn't suddenly give him a superhero body. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is already athletic. He enjoys skateboarding. After the bite, after the incident with Flash, we're shown him blowing off steam at a skate park, swinging from chain to chain. All things that would inspire how he'd use his newfound strength and agility. You kinda gotta think, why would Spider-Man think to swing from webs just because he could spin them? There's a lot less reliance on movie magic and suspension of disbelief this time, as the Amazing Spider-Man meticulously constructs a new Spider-Man. And the first step to breaking down the aforementioned barriers that this Peter Parker has, that first step to maturity, is Gwen Stacy. Gwen works at Oscorp and serves as a tour guide. A tour guide that Peter takes advantage of when breaking into the Spider Lab to uncover the truth about his parents. There is, however, some chemistry between the two, and the two eventually start dating. Gwen is intelligent like Peter, she finds his awkwardness to be charming, and for Peter, she's smart, she's pretty, so why not just kinda run with it? There's a good sense of contrast between the two as well. Peter is solitary, yet Gwen regularly reaches out to speak to Peter. She's the one person in the school that isn't an absolute clown as far as he's concerned. So, after being reprimanded by Uncle Ben for neglecting Aunt May, Peter storms off to a convenience store to pick up some chalky milk, as I suppose you would when you're having a bad day. I mean, I'd do that. He gets into a little spat with the store clerk when he's just a few pennies short for his chalky milk. The store gets robbed, Peter does nothing, simply to spite the store clerk for being a job's worth. Uncle Ben sets out to find Peter, and is shot by the thief that robbed the store. Peter sits by his dying uncle's side screaming for someone to call an ambulance, and once he's home, the police hand him the suspect sketch, and he sets out to avenge Uncle Ben. So, all of the pieces of the Spider-Man origin story are now at play. Peter's been bit by a spider, Uncle Ben has died, so Peter just becomes Spider-Man at this point, right? Well, not quite yet. He gets the Spider-Man costume, but he's still this version of Peter Parker. He's a man laser-focused on his goals, motivated by the emotions he feels. Uncle Ben's killer is going to pay, and so Peter sets out to find Uncle Ben's killer, disrupting various criminals and letting them go if they don't have the killer's identifiable star tattoo. Peter isn't interested in fighting crime, he just wants to take down Uncle Ben's killer. While chasing down some suspects, Peter falls and lands in a shut-down wrestling ring. The criminals yell that they know what he looks like. Peter sees a luchador mask painted on the wall of the ring and discovers that he needs a disguise if he's going to become a vigilante. Once again, justifying things that were otherwise left down to suspension of disbelief. And so the suit is crafted, along with his web shooters, which we see him craft this time. And while, okay, it's still very much an expensive movie magic Spider-Man costume, I guess it's just a bit more believable that Peter could have made it than, say, the Raimi suit. There's still suspension of disbelief at play here, though, because it's a screen-printed rubbery thing, and there's no saying that this science whiz here is going to be great at textiles. We just kind of accept that. Fine. Typically, the finished Spider-Man suit signifies when Peter's journey to becoming Spider-Man is complete, but in this case, it doesn't. He's still exclusively on the hunt for Uncle Ben's killer. He's Spider-Man when he damn well says he's Spider-Man. So Gwen invites Peter to meet her parents, her father being Police Captain George Stacy, who is highly critical of this new masked vigilante in town. Spider-Man and Captain Stacy debate this, with Peter making excuses saying he's doing good, while Captain Stacy views him more as just a vigilante serving his own wants. Captain Stacy is pretty correct at this point. So the dinner with Gwen's parents goes down like a cup of cold sick. Peter apologizes for being disrespectful towards Captain Stacy, and out on the balcony he reveals to Gwen that he has powers, as a means of explaining his behavior. Once again, the love interest here isn't Peter's entire goal, so this film is able to work through things like Peter getting together with Gwen and revealing his powers much faster than the Raimi trilogy, which took up until the end of the second film to do this. He notices a disturbance from the balcony, and he suits up. He gives chase to find a giant lizard chucking cars off the Williamsburg Bridge. Now, remember earlier, Peter did help the kid who was being bullied. If there's any actual immediate possibility of harm coming to innocents, he'll act, and so he does, catching the cars with his webs. The lizard runs off while a horrified father cries out to Spider-Man that his child is trapped in one of the dangling cars. And so Peter goes to rescue the child. He calms the child by removing his mask, proving that he's just an ordinary man, and giving it to the child, telling him it'll make him strong, while he helps the child to escape. After reuniting the child with his father, the father asks, "Who are you?" To which Peter responds, "I'm Spider-Man." Guys, now he's Spider-Man. At this point, it's all come together, and Peter's focus has shifted. In front of him, he witnesses the love between a father and his child. A father and child that he reunited. At this point, he understands what Uncle Ben was trying to teach him. He recognizes that he needs to take on board what Captain Stacy said. He needs to protect the people of this city, people like Gwen. The next scene is him gazing down at his Spider-Man mask, looking his new destiny in the face. It was never about finding out why his parents left him. It was about finding purpose, and now he has one. From this scene onwards, Peter is humanized. He's selfless. He's Spider-Man. And boy do I ever love it. Like how the film's opening scenes very meticulously laid out for us who Peter Parker is, the scene at the bridge excellently lays out who Spider-Man is. Yes, he gets the Spider-Man suit earlier in the film than this, but it's here where it gains its meaning. It's here where Spider-Man gets his name. It's here where Peter Parker looks down onto his mask, and his mask looks back at him. This is who you are. In many ways, that's the end of Act 1, and so far, this is all incredibly strong stuff. Far more complex, philosophically and thematically challenging than the 2002 version of Spider-Man's origin story. But before we move on to what's next, we need to talk a little about the Lizard, as he's quite a major part of the second half of this film. So, Dr. Connors was one of Richard Parker's associates working at Oscorp, and so Peter goes to track him down looking for answers. Dr. Connors' arm must have popped off a few years ago because it's certainly not here and he misses it. So Norman Osborn is dying, and Connors is under pressure to create a regenerative formula to save him. While discussing the research that Richard Parker and Connors worked on, Peter gives Connors a new equation that allows him to complete the regenerative cross-species serum. Lizard DNA spliced with human DNA. Pressed for time, Connors tests it on himself. He gets his arm back, but he also gets a tail. And scales. And yeah, he's a big lizard man now. His lizard form, which we shall refer to as the Lizard, being far more aggressive and callous, creating kind of a Jekyll and Hyde dichotomy. And it all starts to kind of meld together as the Lizard bleeds into Connors, as he develops scales on the side of his face and becomes pretty hostile and defensive, even when in his human form. And that's really about it. Yeah, there was a deleted scene where a motivating factor for Connors restoring his lost arm was wanting to properly hug his son again. It was a short scene and I wish it was kept in. It gave Connors some more humanity. Sadly, he's not really all that layered though. Rhys Ifans does as much as he possibly can to bring this character to life, and he does a great job. At face value, Dr. Connors is a very distinguished, classy, stylish man. And Rhys Ifans commands the screen well. It's just, there's sadly not a great deal of character or writing to back up the great performance that Ifans achieves. So alright, on to the second half of the film. Peter goes to Dr. Connors again to ask him what the best way to go about tracking a reptile is. Connors is acting suspicious. He seems to know too much, and he's got scales on his neck, and his lab rat has turned into a lizard and is eating the other rats. Okay, it's really obvious, perhaps too obvious, but I really like the lizard rat. Feels very Raimi. It's still a strong scene though, like predator and prey staring each other down, hiding their true colors from each other. Connors believing everything he's doing is the right thing, aggrandizing the lizard as a beautiful creature, justifying the hostility as aggressive when threatened, almost like when Peter was justifying his vigilantism to Captain Stacy. And there is a parallel here. The lizard has a goal. He wants others like himself to possess his regenerative abilities. And if they turn into hostile killer lizards, so be it. It's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter who gets hurt. He's laser focused on his goal. Obsessed even. And he's lost his humanity. So Peter goes to Captain Stacy to report Connors as a suspect, believing him to be the lizard. Captain Stacy dismisses it as superstition and asks Peter to leave. After Peter leaves, against his better judgment, Captain Stacy decides to open a case. Peter, believing the NYPD to be inactive, decides to track the lizard himself, heading into the sewers with his camera to follow lizard activity. You've got a really cool scene of Peter constructing a web for him to perch on while he tracks the activity in the sewers. It's a great concept. We've not really had a scene like this in a Spider-Man movie before, and there's something very beauteous about seeing Spider-Man actually crafting a giant web strand by strand. I also love the literal tension and the sound design of this web binding as these little lizards run across the strands. The music swells and then the lizard leaps in to attack Spider-Man, sinking his giant lizard claws into his chest, dragging out his flesh and tearing the suit slowly. It's incredibly well done. Just as the lizard goes to unmask Spider-Man, or tear his head off, either or, Spider-Man fights back and the two land in the sewer water. Spider-Man swims away from the lizard, holding his breath the entire time, and is spat out by one of the sewer pipes. We've not had a Spider-Man fight scene take place underwater before, and it's incredibly tense for it. A fight where the protagonist has to hold his breath for most of it? Great. It's a little short-lived, though. It would have been cool to have taken Spider-Man and the lizard through more of the sewers, perhaps making more use of the confined spaces as the two hide from each other. Also, the lizard tells Spider-Man, and I quote, "You stopped me once, you won't stop me again." Yet Spider-Man didn't really stop the lizard at the bridge, he just kinda kicked him, then rescued the civilians. Yeah, in the film's second half, the construction of the film starts to get a little more sloppy in places. The lizard uncovers Spider-Man's secret identity when he finds his camera in the sewers with a label reading, "Property of Peter Parker" on it. This is definitely the weakest identity reveal in the series. Heck, I do feel like this newly rebooted Spider-Man, had an opportunity to have kept Peter's identity a secret from the villain. That's one way they could make it stand apart from the Raimi series. At the same time, though, it is a means of upping the stakes, and what happens next does justify it. It's just a shame that the identity reveal here is so half-baked. You might as well have just had Peter Parker is Spider-Man written on a sticky note on the wall, and it would be about as layered. It's such a dumb move for Peter to be taking an identifiable object with him when operating as Spider-Man, and it's such a quick and convenient scene, far from the payoff that came with Peter's identity revealed to the Green Goblin in Spider-Man 2002. The slow burn as the blood drips from the ceiling, the tension as Norman looks at Peter's wound, as Peter tries to lie. It was a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. This here just isn't layered. Now at this point, Peter and Gwen are truly ride or dies. Gwen is someone that Peter can confide in, he can report back to, he can tell her what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he's going through. And it's here where he takes full responsibility for the Lizard, and promises to set out to fix everything. There's a great sense of intimacy in this scene here as well. It's probably as intimate as it gets between these two in this film. The shots are tight close-ups with the two actors, who are very gentle with each other. Gwen is Peter's refuge. One sure thing in a life full of uncertainty, the one person he can truly trust, and they swing off into the night together to escape their woes. So the Lizard sets out to take down Peter Parker, so nothing may stand in the way of his grand plan. Once again, we're slipping back into Raimi territory as the Lizard's inner voice loudly proclaims that Peter Parker will not stand in his way. It's hammy, it's scenery chomping, and it's nice to see that we haven't completely lost touch with the goofiest sides to Spider-Man stories, even if it does feel a little out of place in this film's overall tone. My positive feelings towards this moment here probably speak more to my love of Raimi's larger-than-life handling of his villains with their inner monologuing. It's nice for me as a Raimi fan to see some of that here, but it definitely does feel a little out of place given that this film has a much more understated and contemporary approach. So it's an ordinary sunny afternoon at Midtown High, and there is a Lizard, and oh no! The Lizard attacks the school, everyone's clearing out, but Peter is walking head-on into confrontation with the Lizard. Epic. The Lizard chucks Peter into a cabinet and he jumps back out suited up as Spider-Man. Once again, movie magic and suspension of disbelief is on display here, tapping a bit more into the Raimi-isms with logic-defying moments like Peter being able to put his suit on in an instant. This action sequence is easily my favorite in the film. Heck, it's my favorite in the Amazing Spider-Man series. Seeing Peter's enemies strike him off guard where civilians are endangered, my kind of jam. It's also one of the only daytime sequences in this film for Spider-Man. These two characters are fully formed now. Spider-Man is just sassing the hell out of the Lizard. The Lizard is chomping the scenery. They're fighting on the ceilings, the walls, the lockers, and it's here where Andrew Garfield's spider-like physicality, teamed with the very shiny, very segmented-looking Spider-Man costume, really come into play. Spider-Man has never felt so much like an actual spider. It's an incredible scene. We've even got the Lizard flinging his own tail off while Spidey clings to it. It's a scene that showcases the best of what this Spider-Man has to offer. A jokier, snarkier, and more physically majestic Spidey. Wonderful. Pure glee, this. I love it. Also, the Stan Lee cameo is the best we've ever had. As the Lizard and Spidey crash into the library, Stan Lee very nearly gets bonked on the head by the Lizard flinging a table at him, only for Spidey's web to catch it at the last second. Everyone is on top form here. Now, there's a deleted scene in the high school fight where the Lizard tries to lick two high school girls and just... no. Nope. Definitely glad this was cut. I can appreciate some corniness, but the Lizard isn't a nonce. That is one way to lose the already wafer-thin sympathetic angle. Spider-Man is flung aside, the Lizard retreats, and Spider-Man sets out into the sewers to try to track him down, where the Lizard's entire plan is just playing on a monitor down there on a loop, I guess. Why? It's awfully convenient, isn't it? It's here where Peter learns that the Lizard wants to turn everyone into lizards by emitting a cloud of lizard serum into the skies above Manhattan, and... yeah, this has kind of jumped the shark now, hasn't it? I mean, I don't dislike it. It's fun. The Lizard ramping around New York, creating an army of other lizards, the city getting evacuated. That's fun. That's a fun time. but we've definitely lost sight of the more understated, grounded vibe that The Amazing Spider-Man was previously going for. Now, in the place of this, there was actually a deleted scene. Connor's plans weren't just playing on a screen originally. Connor's was there. Peter found him in the sewers and the two have a verbal confrontation. The sympathetic angle is better played here, as Connors confesses how he tried to fix himself, how it was impossible. He asks Peter if, now that he has his powers, if he could ever just give them up and go back to the way he was before. It's a bit philosophical, and I like that. We can also just much better relate to the Lizard in this scene. Then, Oscorp scientist and the man who pressured Connors into becoming the Lizard, Dr. Ratha, enters the scene, shooting at the Lizard and sedating Spider-Man. Dr. Ratha explains to Peter that he's part of a larger picture that encompasses Richard Parker's research as well, hinting that Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man might not have been an accident, before he's killed by the Lizard with a POV shot of the Lizard eating his face. Once again, this feels pretty Raimi. Reminds me a lot of the Venom reveal scene. Now, I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, the character development with Peter and the Lizard here is excellent. It goes a long way to making the Lizard a much better character. The stuff with Dr. Ratha, though, unfortunately, comes across as very sequel-baity, teasing a greater mystery at play. And yes, Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man might not have been an accident, which I've never been fond of. See, Peter going out of his way to break into Oscorp and getting bitten by spiders while he's in there is something I can roll with, even though I do prefer when it's a 100% by chance accident, what are the odds? But I've never been fond of this idea that Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man is part of a greater picture, that his father made the spiders or whatever. Anyone could be Spider-Man put in that situation. Peter's just an ordinary guy, and I think this veers dangerously close to losing sight of that. I think the best way to implement all of this would be to have the first half of this deleted scene reinstated up to just before Dr. Ratha shows up, then have the Lizard rush past Spider-Man and Spider-Man loses him. But alas, his plan plays on a monitor. That's that. So the Lizard sets out into the streets of NYC, unleashing his biological agent, transforming people into lizards, which sounds much more exciting than it is. The idea of the NYPD and Spidey wrangling a load of lizard people all at once would be sweet, but we don't get that here. The focus is more on the evacuation of the city, and Spider-Man is operating in the skies, which is still cool, but I do lament that we couldn't get a little bit of my idea. The Lizard intends to finish the job transforming everyone in the city into lizards using the Ganali device atop the Oscorp tower. So back at Oscorp, Gwen is cooking up an antidote to be launched into the skies using Oscorp's Ganali device that will restore everyone in New York back to humans against Peter's wishes for her to just evacuate. Captain Stacy and the NYPD are chasing down Spider-Man. Typical cops chasing down the wrong guy. Spider-Man is captured by Captain Stacy, and realizing there's nowhere left to go, he reluctantly reveals his face to Captain Stacy, and just Andrew Garfield's facial performance here, top tier. You can really see the sheer difficulty of this decision all there in his eyes, and the score by James Horner swells. It's truly a dramatic moment. Peter convinces Captain Stacy to work with him as the two head to Oscorp, but not without one trigger-happy cop shooting Spider-Man in the leg. Typical cops shooting at people when they're not supposed to. The stakes rise as the Lizard climbs Oscorp Tower, putting Gwen in immediate danger as she hides from him, fending herself off with a Bunsen burner. But fortunately for her, Lizard isn't interested. Just the Ganali device. He takes that and he goes. Laser focus and obsession are finally starting to show their benefits, I guess. Wounded by the bullet, Spider-Man limps his way to Oscorp, but like previous Spider-Man films, New York plays a role in helping Spider-Man to save the day. The father who Spider-Man reunited with his kid at the bridge is a crane operator, and he and his co-workers line the cranes up, making a clear path for Spidey to swing through. An NYPD helicopter lights the path ahead. It's a great scene that just allows itself to revel in the spectacle of Spider-Man swinging. New York City has accepted Spider-Man as their savior and are actively helping him along. The web swinging feels far more weighted and physics-based than ever before, and James Horner is going absolutely insane in the music department. This sequence is pure magic, barely a word of dialogue, purely visceral and mesmerizing. Gwen Stacy gets out of Oscorp and hands Captain Stacy the antidote while Lizard loads his formula into the Ganali device. It's time for the final battle as Spider-Man and the Lizard battle it out atop the Oscorp building. I love this shot right here where the Lizard loads the formula and you can see Spider-Man climbing the spire behind him. Pure comic booky stuff right there, feels straight out of Ditko. Now, as far as final battles in Spider-Man movies go, this is definitely one of the weaker ones in my opinion. However, it's not bad. The Oscorp Tower has a unique design with hexagonal architecture covering the sides of it. And they don't use that in the fight, come on! That's so unique, you can use that. They do at least to a small extent utilize the verticality of this tower as Spidey is flung off of the sides, as well as having Spidey and the Lizard fall into one of the searchlights. We've also got the Lizard throwing liquid nitrogen containers at Peter. There's stuff here, I just feel like we could have gotten a little more out of the unique design of this building for this finale. Instead, most of the fight is spent on the roof. The scene does make decent use of this being the first Spider-Man film to have Peter with web shooters, and the Lizard destroys them. Captain Stacy joins in the fight, Spider-Man spraying liquid nitrogen at the Lizard while Captain Stacy shoots off parts of his body was a particularly gnarly moment. Captain Stacy gives Peter the antidote to load up into the Ganali device while he continues shooting at the Lizard. But all too soon, the Lizard's claws grow back and he impales Captain Stacy, delivering a fatal blow. The Lizard makes one final, last-ditch effort at stopping Peter, but it's too late. The antidote is loaded and dispersed into the skies of New York City. The Lizard begins transforming back into Dr. Connors as the spire falls. Peter is falling off the edge of the Oscorp Tower with no webs to swing from, and is saved by Dr. Connors, who screams in agony as he reverts back to his true self. And Rhys Ifans really sells the pain he's in here. Peter runs to Captain Stacy's aid, but it's too late. He's not going to make it. His final wish is that Peter promise him to leave Gwen out of it. Now, I'm going to be completely fair here. There's a number of ways this request can be interpreted. He could have just meant keep Spider-Man as far from Gwen as possible, but Peter Parker can remain in her life. But Peter decides to honor his wish. Now, we follow this with a nice moment really cementing Peter's arc as he becomes a better, more reliable person. Throughout the film, Aunt May's asked him to pick up eggs, and he hasn't done it. After the final battle, he returns home wounded, embracing Aunt May, and reveals that yes, he did indeed get the eggs. It's a nice little touch, a nice way of conveying Peter taking a bit more control and acknowledging Aunt May, who he's kind of pushed to the background of his life up until this moment. So Peter no longer speaks to Gwen. He observes Captain Stacy's funeral perched on the roof from a distance, but he's not present. Gwen finally decides to ask him what's up when he breaks the bad news that he can no longer be with her. Following this, Aunt May asks why Peter couldn't be with Gwen, and he tells her that he's no good. And we get a nice moment where Aunt May gives Peter a reality check, that beyond all of his struggles, he's a good man. Without knowing Captain Stacy or his final wish, Aunt May has effectively rejected it, allowing Peter a chance to make the decision for himself rather than be swayed by Captain Stacy, who was admittedly kind of a hard ass. The ending of the film is narrated by a voicemail from Uncle Ben, as Peter gathers the pieces of his life. Uncle Ben basically reinforces the growth that Peter Parker has had over the course of the film. That he'll go down different paths, and not always with resolutions that bring him joy or happiness, but ultimately there are people who love him and have his back no matter what. Another nice touch is how Flash Thompson gradually respects Peter more as the film goes on, going on to become pretty friendly with him by the time the film ends. Now, the ending of this film is pretty controversial. Peter sits down behind Gwen Stacy at school and hints that he wants to reignite the flame and try and pick up where he left off with Gwen smiling. Peter is now willing to break his promise to Captain Stacy. Over the course of the film, Peter has gone from a confused, broken man wondering why his parents abandoned him, lamenting the love he never received from them. And at the end of the film, Peter chooses love. He chooses Gwen, and that's a nice idea. It ends the film on a really nice note. Love conquers all. However, the optics here are far from ideal. If we look at it from any other perspective, Peter effectively ghosted Gwen after her father died, broke up with her, she grieved, and he could have been there for her, and he wasn't. And now that the dust has settled, he's ready to go back for more. Now, Gwen does at least have some understanding that Captain Stacy did make him promise, so there is that. That does allow for this to make some sense and for it to be believable that Gwen would be at least a little willing to reciprocate and forgive. I think the problem here is that they had to cover the promise, the breakup, and the reunion all in such a short space of time. I think the best thing they could have done here is had scenes of Peter and Gwen alone. The goal of the scene with Peter would be to convey that he wants to give it another shot with Gwen, and he's seriously considering it. And then you cut to Gwen with a scene proving that she still holds a great deal of fondness and affection for Peter, and that she would take him back given the chance. Then we go to our final swing with that same sense of hope, but without the weird timing and weird optics, allowing the next movie to reunite the two, possibly after a time skip. Having Peter swing into the night with a heavy heart, but the possibility of rekindling things would be such a quintessentially Spider-Man way to end the film. But instead, now we're kind of opening the book much earlier than that. And narratively, it works. Optically, it's just a bit weird. Also, the final swing is absolutely sick. So that is The Amazing Spider-Man. It's a reboot that had a lot to prove, especially when stacked up against the brilliance that was the Sam Raimi trilogy. It was always going to be a hard sell because of that. But with that said, I think The Amazing Spider-Man not only sticks the landing, but does so with flying colors. The Amazing Spider-Man demonstrates an understanding of what made the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies special while moving in different directions. It's the same foundations, but what's built upon it in The Amazing Spider-Man is vastly different. The way these films approach the character of Peter Parker, the way they approach his upbringing, how they handle relationships. The Amazing Spider-Man is all about the growth of Peter Parker as a person, gaining humanity, improving, being more present, learning to be kind. Andrew Garfield is wonderful in the role of Peter Parker, but for me where he absolutely shines the most is when he's suited up as Spider-Man. His physique, body language, and movements lend wonderfully to this new Spider-Man, who moves around more like an actual spider with his lanky limbs and shiny suit. He comes across as lighter on his feet. He's more artistic with how he uses his webs in battle when compared to, say, Tobey Maguire, who had more the physique of a strong man, used a lot of punches in battle, and wears a suit that is just the definition of movie magic. The suit in The Amazing Spider-Man works for what it sets out to achieve. It's a more sporty, segmented, and practical design for Spidey. However, there's a reason why most of the time you see it, it's at night. The suit only looks good under dynamic lighting, but when it's lit right, it can look really pretty. But one thing that also cements Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man is that he comes with the sass that the character is known for. Tobey Maguire had it too, but just to a lesser extent, and the delivery wasn't quite as good as what Andrew Garfield does here. Visually as well, the lizard looks great. He's a bit less dinosaurian than I think most people would expect, with his more humanoid features ultimately taking precedence. His design harkens a little bit more to how Ditko drew the lizard. No snoot or massive fangs, he still looks very intimidating, and having him rock up in a tattered lab coat before the climax was a really nice homage to the lizard's classic design. The cinematography by DOP John Schwartzman is full of unique choices. The film has quite an earthy, almost aged look to it. There's a warm, intimate look to the Parker household, and Dr. Connor's laboratory feels very lived in. New York City doesn't feel overly glamorous either, it feels more like it does in reality. It's a very immersive looking film, and the special effects are absolutely top-notch, with the lizard, an all-CGI character, still holding up wonderfully 10 years later. Marc Webb is known for his rom-coms, character pieces, and music videos, and that's all on display here. You can tell he brings that pedigree, but he also handles the action pretty strongly too. I don't think he makes as good use of space as Raimi did, and again, I do think there's a fair bit more potential that could be wrung out of the action sequence concepts. I would have loved to have spent more time with Spider-Man and the Lizard in the sewers. Maybe see Spider-Man and Lizard battling their way through not just the science labs, classrooms, and library in the school fight, maybe throw the gym in there too, the lunch areas. There are tons of New Yorker archetypes that I would have loved to have seen turn into lizards during the final act. Imagine lizard halal food vendors, lizard crane operators, lizard tourists. It could have been fun to see Spider-Man and the NYPD fighting off hordes of them. There's potential there, and seeing that realized isn't something I take for granted, but it's hard not to think about when Sam Raimi was all about wringing as much potential from action sequences as possible. I never once looked at, say, the train or bank fight from Spider-Man 2 and thought, yeah, there's more they could have done with that. Marc Webb is by no means a worse director in any way, but Raimi absolutely wins it on the action front for me. Also, with how meticulously the Amazing Spider-Man constructs a new Peter Parker, a new world for him to live in, and a new landscape of lives, it does make it all the more jarring when things do get sloppy. Peter going to a multi-billion-dollar tech corporation, just busting in by picking a random name badge out of a bowl with no need for identification or any kind of verification process. The horribly on-the-nose, "Are you having trouble finding yourself?" line from the desk lady. The sloppy fashion in which the Lizard discovers Peter's identity. How the Lizard just has his evil plan playing on auto-repeat in his sewer lair. These things are pretty difficult to ignore, and unfortunately the Lizard just doesn't feel like a fully fleshed out villain. Deleted scenes showcase the potential of the character, but I can't really include this in a review of the film if it's not actually in the film. The only thing I'm glad they cut was Dr. Rather telling Peter he's part of some greater picture involving his parents. So, let's talk about the parents subplot. The film was advertised as the untold story for Spider-Man, that this would be exploring a new angle, and that new angle would be Peter's absent parents, and okay, really, who was all that interested in that? But I think using them as a catalyst for Peter's struggles in this film, making them a motivating factor, was a very clever way of approaching it. It worked well in service of Peter Parker, and I don't think it was ever necessary to make it into this overarching mystery. And while Dr. Rather's scene was cut, we did still get the after credits with the mysterious figure implying that this would go on to become a greater mystery. I think something The Amazing Spider-Man did really well was that it didn't give Peter what he wanted. He wanted to find out what happened with his parents. He wanted to take down Uncle Ben's killer. He didn't get that. Instead, he got a sense of purpose and an important lesson from Uncle Ben. Peter is a restless man living an inconvenient life, and I think that gels really well with this. We've also got to talk about the score by the late James Horner. He takes an incredibly different approach to Danny Elfman, but has crafted a really nice theme for Spider-Man, and I loved his take on the responsibility theme here as well. There are some really unique choices on display, and I love the theme that he gave to both Peter and Gwen. It's not as larger than life as Elfman's score, it's far more intimate, and I think that fits this version of Spider-Man wonderfully. On a whole, The Amazing Spider-Man is not as approachable as Raimi's trilogy, which openly embraced suspension of disbelief and movie magic while giving us grounded character dynamics and relationships. But there is a great deal of artistry in how The Amazing Spider-Man weaves the character of Peter Parker with the themes of the film, with different characters and elements that motivate and influence him. There's a lot more moving parts to The Amazing Spider-Man, and for the most part it absolutely succeeds. As I say, not as approachable, but if you really engage with it and are willing to meet it on its terms, you are absolutely rewarded for it. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies are classics, but I think the fact that there's even debate as to whether or not this lives up to it or even surpasses it shows that The Amazing Spider-Man is something special. For me, I'm firmly in the Raimi camp. I think those movies had a much clearer idea of what they wanted to achieve, are more approachable, and it's like, I guess apples and oranges. I love the Raimi trilogy as much as I do because I love the decisions that Sam Raimi makes with the character. I love his style, his signature. The Amazing Spider-Man just doesn't click with me the same way Raimi's movies do, but at the same time it doesn't have to. It's for a different audience, and there's plenty of people who find this to be their favorite. And being completely honest, I don't think a Spider-Man 4 would have survived in a post-Dark Knight world, and this was a far more trendy Spider-Man that would meet more contemporary tastes, and I fully respect it for that. But also the love that is on display for this character and his legacy. Maybe it's taste changing, maybe it's MCU fatigue, but the last time I watched this movie, going in with the purpose of analyzing each and every detail, it just hit differently. Maybe it's the fact that I guess I relate to this Peter Parker quite a bit more now than I did back then. I'm a more mature person, able to recognize that there are many times when my own actions and attitude have been clouded by the same tunnel vision, the same laser focus that Peter Parker starts this film with. That I have learned lessons along the way, that different people have taught me different lessons and inspired me, and one of those people is my good friend JP. See, I've mentioned throughout this video that I previously dogged on this film Something Fierce. As I'd watch it, I'd actively seek out reasons to feel glad that the Amazing Spider-Man series had ended. That nothing of value was lost when it would eventually get rebooted once again. And my approach to Spider-Man film retrospectives was all about pushing that agenda that the current movies we have now are the best possible outcome, and that the Amazing Spider-Man series never held any potential. JP here contacted me. We became friends, and it's safe to say he inspired me with how fair he is towards all the Spider-Men, his love for the character, his love for the art that comes with bringing the character to life. Like Peter Parker with Captain Stacy, I took what he said on board, and I hope this video will be my, metaphorically speaking, Williamsburg Bridge moment as a content creator. JP is in a massive sense the man to thank for the improvements I've made to how I approach movies. I mean, okay, combine that with going to university, studying film, and improving my film analysis because of that. Still, university didn't teach me how to identify a bad faith criticism. JP was a major contributor in that, so I think it's only right that we hear a few words from JP. Take it away, bud.
Hey guys, JP here. I would like to, first of all, thank Pup for allowing me to be a part of his video, as, you know, I'm one of the reasons for why he enjoys The Amazing Spider-Man 1. And, you know, I just want to explain some of the stuff of how Pup and I met and why the movie means a lot to me, why I think it's good, but I'm going to go step by step. So the reason why I think it's a very good movie is because I really enjoy the characters of Peter, Gwen, Captain Stacy, and main Uncle Ben, and even the Lizard. I've always stood by, I'm a person who cares more about characters and story, where what I mean by that is I'd rather have a movie that has really great characters and either an okay or bad plot, because I will remember the characters more, versus a good story but bland characters. And I know it makes a lot of people point out the plot hole and inconsistencies or whatever, but for me, that doesn't bother me because I really enjoyed the cast of characters. I really do find this Peter very relatable, very introverted, yes, but still very strong-willed, like, you know, with the other versions of Spider-Man. How he's very flirtatious with Gwen, but you still see that nerdiness of him. How he's a realistic portrayal of a nerd, how he's not the quote-unquote kid who gets bullied all the time. He's just a person who's quiet, keeps to himself, doesn't try to stand out too much. And I do appreciate that. I love Gwen as a character. You know, I love the fact that she is very, but she's very not only intelligent, but also the fact that she does also want to help Peter out, even though she does not have powers. And I do like the fact that she has two people now in her life that risk their own lives to help other people. And I do like how we do see that affect her, and how she herself is a very entertaining character to even follow. Like, if they whenever a scene is with only Gwen Stacy, I'm still engaged because I really like her character. Captain Stacy's really dope. I do like how he's kind of one of the other reasons for why Peter matures and becomes the hero we know him as. You know, Uncle Ben was that push. Captain Stacy was even more of a harder push, because once Peter understood from the other's point of view of how he is and what he's doing before he becomes fully Spider-Man, he's like, oh, I'm doing the right thing, it's no biggie. But when he sees Captain Stacy, he's like, no, this is what Spider-Man's doing is wrong. He shouldn't be doing this. He's hearing him. He's finally listening and hearing what he's saying. And he's thinking about what Uncle Ben used to say, because he was so angry he didn't want to listen to him. And I think, at least for me in that perspective, it really is solid to me. Like I said, I really catch his character. He's like, he's not one of those, you know, stereotypical dads, like, oh, you could date my daughter, you look too big. No, he still shows Peter respect. He still shows him kindness, but it's a little bit more tougher. It's like he's like, you know, he doesn't try to shoo him away, but he does genuinely, he doesn't try to disrespect Peter, because Peter doesn't nothing but respect him. So I know that they didn't know if that cliche, you can't date my daughter, get out of here. I do really appreciate that. I love Aunt May and Uncle Ben. I really do love Sally Field as Aunt May. I just really like whenever Aunt May and Peter are on screen together, you really feel that love and care they have for each other, but she understands why Peter's being so distant right now, because she understands what he's going through as she has to work through some things as well. And I really do like that. Cannot remember the name of the actor of Uncle Ben. Pub, if you could throw his name in there. He does a great job as well. I really do love him as Uncle Ben, as he is somebody who is still flawed, obviously, because some people think Uncle Ben is some perfect character. No, Uncle Ben is human, just like anyone else. He does have his flaws, as it's implied that, like he does have his flaws, or he's not some holier than thou person. But he's very wise. He's a very experienced person. He gives people the best advice he can give them. And he genuinely understands why he wants to understand what happened to his parents, not because of the fact that Peter cares more about his parents than Uncle Ben and May, but Ben understands, no, you want to know why your parents left you. I can understand that. He does his best to help them. And I do really appreciate that. And even little characters like Flash Thompson. Like Flash Thompson, for me, is the best of the three of the live action adaptation, because he grows and develops as a character. And I know Flash Thompson does show up in Spider-Man 3 at Harry's funeral, but we never saw how he developed as a person after the first little scene of Spider-Man 1. But for this one, we actually do see him go from being just your classic bully to wanting to care for Peter, hearing that his uncle passed away, to eventually him and Peter becoming pretty decent friends. They're not the best as a friend, but they're pretty solid friends, honestly, and I like that. And I do wish that Flash, Gwen, and Peter were kind of like those trios that Peter, MJ, and Harry was in the Raimi films. I feel like if they did Flash, Gwen, and Peter, that would be really interesting in my opinion. But we know how that went. But overall, that's why I personally think the Maze Runner 1 is good. The reason I reached out, I wanted to talk to Pup, was because I saw his Maze Runner 1 video way back in the day, and I didn't agree with it. And I could see that since he was a smaller YouTuber, I had a feeling he would be more open to having the conversation, and he was, because we both were respectful with each other. We eventually went to a voice chat on Discord. We talked about it, and I didn't want him to like the movie. Because at the time he really hated the Amazing Spider-Man. He really hated it, so he made it, at least in the video, may seem like he can't understand how anyone on planet Earth could like the movie. So I was giving him my perspective on it, about why I enjoyed it, and that's all I wanted it to be. I didn't want him to like the movie or anything like that. I just wanted to be like, hey, here's why I personally like the movie. And he understood it. He completely understood why I enjoyed it and everything. And, I didn't even realize that he eventually was slowly going to appreciate the movie even more. Like, he went from heading into thinking, it's all right, to now he enjoys it. At least from what he's told me. I know he's making the video, so maybe once I see the video, who knows, maybe he dislikes it now. But at the time, but at least from what I could tell, he does seem to enjoy the Maze Runner 1, overall. So I really do. I really did see that, and I appreciate that. I do like how he, does feel I'm one of the main reasons for why that is, and I appreciate that. As well, I know some people think that the Maze Runner 1 deserves more love, and to an extent, I agree with that. I believe it should deserve more love. The thing is, though, after the little renaissance that was happening around the time of Homecoming, then when Insomniac added the Maze Runner 1 suit to the game, and Andrew coming back in No Way Home, I feel like even during that part, Maze Runner 1 at the village was getting a lot more love, a lot more like, hey, this movie isn't as bad as you think it is. So I do agree that I wouldn't mind it deserving a little bit more love, but at the same time, I feel like so many people have came and rewatched it and given it another chance to be like, yeah, this movie is really enjoyable, or knowing as bad as I thought it was. So for me personally, do I think deserves more love? Yeah, a little bit more, but I think the love it's getting right now is all I need. But that's just my 2 cents on it. And finally, for this is the biggest one, for what it means to me, Maze Runner 1. The reason why this movie means a lot to me is because of the fact that it was the first movie I ever saw in theaters, but at the same time, my mother passed away in 2009, And the movie came out in 2012. So, during that 3 years, it was a big adjustment period for me and my family. And at the time when I saw The Amazing Spider-Man in theaters, I was just having a good time because, Spider-Man, my favorite superhero, and this first time going to a movie theater. And when I got older, I realized that movie helped me, grow and mature to try and move past my mother dying, because of the fact that in that movie, seeing Peter go through Uncle Ben's passing and all that stuff, like the scene where Peter's walking down the hall when everyone's moving out of the way, that's how I felt, especially during that time. And with the fact that I realized the reason why Peter puts on that suit is to honor Uncle Ben, almost anything I try to do is to honor my mother the best way that I can. So it made me really fully understand why Peter does what he does. Like, I understood it, but it made me fully understand it and even, relate to what he's doing of trying to honor somebody that he really loves and cares about, that has passed away. So that's what I try to do with my mother as well. So that's why the movie, means a lot to me. I'm not saying, like, if you don't like Amazing Spider-Man 1 and you're hearing this and you think I'm trying to, do anything like guilt trip you on stuff, no, that's not my intention. I'm just giving you the reason for why I personally love the movie, and why it means a lot to me, because it has helped me. It did help me throughout that time. I just didn't realize it yet. I was like, I'm improving stuff and trying to be happier, and I was like, it was mostly because of that movie, because it made me fully understand why he did what he did. And that's why, I really enjoyed Amazing Spider-Man 1. So once again, Pup, I thank you for letting me on here, man. I hope the video turns out great. And, for everyone watching this, I thank you. Subscribe to Pup. Leave a comment down below. And let's just have a great conversation out of this. All right? Talk to you later.
Thanks for joining me, JP. Thank you for everything. I guess I don't need to tell people to subscribe and comment because you've already done it for me. What a king. So also, I would like to thank the generous patrons, starting with a literal shout out for those who donate $10 or more a month, who are Kale Bennett, That Jordo, King K, Legendary Ray Ray, Adam Myers, Mr. Dr. SP, Dr. Pending, Sergio, and Cyrus, and Cyrus, the Skeptic. I got the hiccups! Cyrus, the Skeptic! I got the hiccups.
I think you should keep that. Was amazing. You should keep that. You should use that.
I'm gonna. And now a lower volume shout out for the patrons in the $5 and above tier, who are Broski, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Council of Geeks. If you want your name in the credits of every one of my videos, you can do so for as little as $1 a month on Patreon. Give me money. And with all that being said, thank you so much to all of you watching these videos. Next up, we will be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, so look forward to that. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. See you soon.